poet, Israeli poet, religious singer. His name was Rabbi, I'm not sure if he was a rabbi himself, but David Riahi. He was a famous poet, and much can be said with regards to him. One of the leading cantors he was, definitely in the history of the state of Israel, without a doubt. And we've spoken about various other Chazanim cantors over here. He was born, I believe, back in the English year 1928 on the 30th of November. He passed away on the 9th of March 2013. So we're not recording this at the time period of his Hilula. He was a Payatan, someone world renowned. He was a מחבר לחנים ומורה לפייטנים המובילים בישראל. בהם החזן משה חבושה והרב חגי בצרי. Very interesting now. Rav Moshe Chabusha, very famous, also Payatan in its own. He was actually born in the year 1961, and I think we've spoken about him on various occasions before. I think, if I'm not mistaken, he actually was related to other great rabbis, I think especially from Baghdad, if I'm not mistaken. There was a famous Rabbi Gorgi Yair, if I'm not mistaken, who we've spoken about on various occasions before. We actually recorded the video within regards to some of his relatives, if I'm not mistaken. I think he famously, Rav Chavusha, was connected to the Baharian neighborhood, or he is connected to the Baharian neighborhood, singing in various different synagogues, including the Borashov synagogue, the Adda synagogue in Nachlaot, representing very much Chalabi Aleppo community. Also close to Chacham Ovadia Yosef he was, when Rav Ovadia Yosef was alive, and that very much celebrated singer he happens to be. So there was a closeness over that. He's performed with many of the great musicians Rav Chavusha has in of its own, respectively, and has a discography, a massive collection of songs, especially from Galpaz, something that we have to point out over here. But be it as may, we happen to be speaking about David Riahi over here, and Tzorat Piyut Lamat Mapayatan Asher Mizrahi. So he very much came under auspices of the famous Asher Shimon Mizrahi. He's another great Payatan that we have actually recorded a video about here on this series before. He was musical. He was, let's say, a tenor chazan, a malchin mushrat Zioni. He was a Zionistic musician, cantor, arguably one of the greatest Payatan in Jewish history. Was a Chazan of the Sephardic community, Eidut Mizrach community of Jerusalem, and he was famous from many places across the world that will take his brilliant songs. I think he actually wrote as many as 600 songs, if I'm not mistaken, and I think at least 200 of them were in Ivrit. Many of them were in Arabic also of here. So he really come from the caliber of Asher Mizrahi, when the famous Payatans at the time. Shrabim, okay, so going back to David Riahi, or cantor David Riahi, Shrabim Melachatna, Mushma'im Barov Batei Knesset Tzvadim B'Yisrael, Od B'Odo Yeled. Sabim Bnei Melech Tunisia. So I think his family actually came from Tunisia. We're going to explore a bit about one of his forefathers, another great rabbi, Rabbi Nisim Yarchi, in a few minutes. B'meshech Shanim Rabot Ayat Talmidav Shel Mankik Yehuda Yahadut Tunis. And I think he was close to the famous Rabbi Matzliach Mezuz, a rabbi we've spoken about on various occasions before. He was one of the outstanding rabbis in Tunisia and Jewry. Rabbi Matzliach Mezuz was, sadly, I think he was murdered in the year 1971, on the 18th of January. He was born in the year 1911. He actually founded the famous Yeshivat Kisa Rachamim, which is actually still standing very much and prospering to this day. Now in Bnei Brak, originally it happened to have been in Tunisia. Among his Rabbi Matzliach Mezuz's rabbis include Rabbi Rachamim Chai Chayuta Cohen, another rabbi we've spoken about before. Among his Talmidim, Rabbi Meir Mezuz, or Rabbi Meir Nisim Mezuz, to give a great title. And he sadly passed away, I believe, on around Yisroel Chag time or Pesach this current year, that there was about 8 months ago. And also Rabbi Matzliach Mezuz was his teacher, and he was very much a great rabbi of his time. That's something that we have to point out. Okay, so let's continue speaking about David over here. So I think, so Rabbi Matzliach Mezuz was unfortunately killed. I think it happened to be a few years after the Six-Day War in 1967. So he was born, let's go back to Rav David over here, in Cantor David. He was born in Tunisia, in the city of Tunis. And as we said before, I think he's a descendant of the former chief rabbi of Tunisia, Rabbi Nisim Yarchi, a rabbi we're going to speak about in a minute. And B'tchilat Shanot Shishim, של המאה ה-20 עלה עם משפחתו לישראל. So I think in 1960s he would go and make aliyah to the land of Israel. והשתקע בירושלים, he would actually go to Jerusalem at that point in time. And after several years, I think the family will actually move to Netanya. And after, לאחר שהרב דוד שלוש, רב הראשי של העיר, הזמין אותו לשמש כחזן קבוע בית כנסת המרכז העיר. Very, very interesting. Rav David Shlush, if I'm not mistaken, was chief rabbi of Netanya for 63 years. So he will actually ask him and invite him to become the cantor over there. Let's just say, which was a very, very prominent position, we have to point out over there. Rav David Shlush, being very great rabbi of Netanya, 63 years, one of the longest standing chief rabbis at that. He passed away, I believe, in the year 2016, if I'm not mistaken. He was author of great Torah books. You know, I think his father happens to be Rav Yosef Shlush, rabbi we've spoken about on various occasions before inside series. And I think he was a rabbi of the famous Romania neighborhood in Jerusalem. And he was close to Rabbi Ben Sion Meir Chai Uziel at various points in time. And other great rabbis he was close to, including Rabbi Shalom Mashash in Jerusalem. He happened to be the chief rabbi at that point in time. And I think Rabbi Mordechai Eliyahu and various other rabbis. So he would actually invite Rab David, Cantor David over here, to go to Netanya and take on this prominent position. יזמין אותו לשמש כחזן, קבע בית כנסת המרכזי בעיר, שבו הקים לימים, מקהילה שתלויה אודון בתפילתו, למרות המעבר לנתניה. לא שכח את קהל מעריציו בירושלים. מדי פעם היה מגיע לעיר הקודש, לצלצל את שירת הבקשות. He would actually come there, especially for the שירת הבקשות at that point in time, in the famous בית כנסת העתיקים של שכונת נחלאות. Now, נחלאות is an area in Jerusalem as a community we have visited on various occasions before and filmed over there. שמור של הרב דוד ריאחי, פתח בפניו דלתות רבות, הן בישראל והן מעבר עלייה, מעת לעת היה מוזמן לביתו או לסוכתו של הרב עובדיה יוסף. I believe he would actually sing for Rab עובדיה יוסף various different things. ושם היה שר, כמו כן נטל חלק באופן קבע בהילולה המסורתית הנערכת מדי שנה בישיבת כיסא רחמים בבני ברק. So he would also be connected very much so to the famous yeshiva in בני ברק, ישיבת כיסא רחמים, a Tunisian yeshiva I've pointed out. ריאחי לא פסק להופיע בפני קהל גם בגיל מאוחר. בגיל 79 נענה לזמנת הרב שלמה חדד. I think he would actually have correspondence with and have invitation for, שהיה בעבר תלמידו. ינצח על פתיחת עונת שירה הבקשות בית הכנסת העתיק אבוהב, if I'm not mistaken, over there. And very interesting. Beit Knesset Abuhab, I think it's Beit Knesset, I think, from ששסה השולחן בלב העיר העתיקה של צפת. It's a synagogue from the fabric of Tzfat, specifically one of the four holy cities. על פי המסורת בית כנסת, קרוי על שמו של רבי יצחק אבוהב, מחבר הספר מנורת המאור. It's named after a great rabbi who was the author of the famous Menorat HaMa'or also, so that's something that we have to point out over here. Maybe he had ties also to Castilla, if I'm not mistaken. I mean the family maybe it originated from. בהזדמנות זו הוענקה לו תעודת הוקרה מטעם כל רינה וישועה, המכון לשירה ופיוט, על תרומתו הבירה בתחום הפיוט. הופיע בבית אביחי, if I'm not mistaken, מרכז, זה רב תנחומי לתרבות בירושלים. We have to point out up there with regards to those many events. מקבל שהוקרא על תרומתו האדירה לפיוט בארץ ישראל. I think when he was 83 years of age, if I'm not mistaken, he would start החל מצבו הבריאותי להידרדר, ובשל כך נאלץ לבטל הזמנות מעבר לים. So I think he passed away when he was 85 years of age and was buried in Netanya, if I'm not mistaken. So he was very, very much a famous pietan of that point in time. Included among his rabbis, Rabbi Asher Mizrahi, who was a rabbi, he was a cantor, Rabbi Matzliach Mezuz, as we've mentioned about before. And among his Talmudim includes Rabbi Chagai Batzri, Chazan Eliyahu Ozan, Chazan Yechiel Nahari, another great pietan, and Chazan Moshe Chabusha, who we just mentioned about just before. Let's speak about Chazan Nahari for a minute. He was actually born also in the year 1961, just like Rav Chabusha, Cantor Chabusha actually happens to have been. He's a Paitan, a Chazan of Israel. He himself, Yechiel Nahari, I think, was born in Jerusalem, and I think, I'm not so sure exactly where. I think they were second generation actually from Yemen and Syria, and when I think he was 4 years of age. כבר מגיל 4 נמשך לבתי הכנסת העתיקים בירושלים, שבהם שלט הנוסח הירושלמי והחלבי, אז he's חלבי, and from Aleppo. בגיל 8 היה מסדר בכל יום שישי קריאת מן התורה. He would already become accustomed to the Torah reading in himself. שדרו ברדיו ברשת א', so he'd be involved with radio stations over there at such a young age, and would start doing performances at a young age. את דרכו בחזונות החל כשהיה בן 13. חזן לוי מארצות הברית לקח אותו לשלושה קונצרטים בארצות הברית. He would go to 3 concerts when he was only about 13 years of age at the time period of bar mitzvah. He learned in I think למד בית ספר היסודי חורב, if I'm not mistaken, over there, which is a מוסדות חינוך, let's say, דתי לאומית one, a national religious one, let's say, in itself. Also, I think he would learn in Yeshivat Merkaz Rav and Yeshivat Ner Yisrael, if I'm not mistaken, which is a more, let's say, Lithuanian yeshiva in America, in Baltimore, which is spoken about various occasions before. And when he was 18 years of age, I think he would actually go to this. We're talking about Yechiel Nahari, famous Chazan. He would actually go to the army at that point in time, and I think. He would, for example, I think in 2015, שימש כשופט בתוכנית המציאות פייטן של ערוץ 20, if I'm not mistaken. He's released various albums. One of his albums actually called Pirkei Avot, which was in the year 2005. So many of his writings, let's just say, I mean, of his Puritan really has a connotation within regards to various different songs and poetry, really connected to Judaism and Yahudut. That is something that we definitely must have to point out over here. Okay, so we're just speaking about Chazan Nahari over here, but just to illustrate the greatness with regards to David Riahi over here, just with regards to his brilliance and what actually the music he's done. And this, you can actually listen, I think, especially on the internet, there's many versions of various different songs that he actually published all throughout the years and various different live concerts. That's something that we have to point out over there. I believe he passed away, it was on 12th of Nisan, it was, and you can just see some of the greatness, the great people he happens to have been connected at that stage in all throughout on the various different occasions. So that's something that we have to point out over here. Also, he was composed many dozens of piyutim and poetry, especially encapsulating the Sephardic Jerusalems and let's just say the panache of itself of music, and that's something that we have to point out. So he was, I think, he visited Rabbi Ovadia Yosef's sukkah also, and there was choirs accompanying his various different singings and his brilliance, as I said. So now I want to speak about, I think, one of his forefathers, the famous Rabbi Nissim Yarchi. In a minute, I'm just going to take a 1-minute break, and we're going to continue speaking about another great Tunisian chief rabbi who passed away in the year 1928. So just watch your space from there, and don't forget to subscribe in the meantime while you are just waiting for Hi, Shalom everyone. Thanks for being patient and waiting. Let's just, we happen to be doing a special edition. We're speaking about the famous Paitan, Chazan David Riahi, Chazan David Riahi, over here, famous one, over here. So we're going to speak about one of his ancestors, Rabbi Nissim Yarchi, who happens to have been a chief rabbi of Tunisia of his day. He was actually born in the year 1850, really great rabbi, and I believe he passed away in the year 1928. He was not just a rabbi, he was also a dayan in Tunisia. He was a head of Jewish court, Abedin, in Tunis, and a chief rabbi for a period of time. And he passed away eventually in 1928. It's actually, let's explore a bit with regards to him, his life. He would actually learn under auspices of Rav Chai Levi, if I'm not mistaken, and also the chief rabbi of Tunisia, Rabbi Eliyahu Chai Borjan, who we've spoken about before. I think when he was 33 years of age, he was really among some of the great rabbis of Tunisia at that point in time, with regards to providing various different haskamot for different books, Torah books over there. I think in the year Tafresh Ein Aleph, if I'm not mistaken, he would actually be a representative of the Kehila. I think maybe being very well traveled to Algeria, and especially with regards to the topic of kashrut, respectively. And I think Rav Shatruk, he was very close to, who was a chief rabbi before him. I think he would be appointed. I think Rabbi Yarchi would become, chief rabbi at that point in time. And very interesting. Until he passed away, if I'm not mistaken. And he would write various different of his Shuvot, Torah books in of itself, questions and answers, as we call Shelot, and Shuvot Mishpat Katuv. And very much connected to Rav Yisrael Zayton. Remember, we've spoken about Rav Zayton on various occasions here on this series. He was also a head of Jewish court and a head rabbi in Tunisia, and considered one of the great rabbis of that point in time. But I think it was close to Rabbi Yosef Bochritz, various different. They would actually, and Rabbi Chaim Chori will quote him in various occasions in various different books and sightings. We have to point out, I think they were from Jerba, who'd fasob sefer Matzachayim shel Harav Chori, or quote him. Also, Rav Yosef Soso HaKohen also would bring back various different questions and answers, if I'm not mistaken. Rav Yosef Soso HaKohen, I believe, passed away back in the year 1980, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, so very interesting. So I think his son was Rabbi David Riahi, if I'm not mistaken. So that would also be, that would be the grandfather of David Riahi, if I'm not mistaken. Rabbi David Riahi was a dayan of the great Betin of the Jewish court of Tunis. We have to point out, so that's very interesting. Also, I believe Rav Nissim Yarchi would have a son called Rabbi Pinchas Yarchi, also, if I'm not mistaken. He was actually the chief rabbi sandwich between Rabbi Moshe Shatruk and Rabbi David Chizkiah Jaz, if I'm not mistaken. Really great rabbis. But he passed away in 1928. We're talking about 98, just nearly 98 years ago here. Here from time of recording, we happen to be right at the start of the year 2026. So these are great forefather, let's just say, within regards to this famous Payatan of that point in time, David Riahi. He's got some excellent music books actually available online. You can actually see various different chazanot performances that he did, and absolutely breathtaking. That's something I have to point out. I think there's actually a YouTube channel which someone else Tunisian actually set up within regards to him. I think discs are still available, especially on various different sites, and you can actually see some of the great performance he did over the years. That's something that we have to point out. Also, this famous Payatan actually did, I think even on Amazon, his music is available, and it's considered one of the famous Payatans, let's just say, respectively, of this specific era. So very interesting. We actually recorded today a video on the history of Tunisian Jewry. We're doing a multi-part series. We covered part number 3, not tonight, earlier on this morning. That's something that we have to point out over here. So I recommend everyone to actually watch over that. It's very important. First part, I believe we actually spoke about, if I'm not mistaken, we really did concentrate on the really early days of Tunisian Jewry, and then as time has went on, we have progressed very much so, and explored the 17th, 18th, and really 19th century, and very early parts, let's just say, of the the 20th century. So we're going to probably do 2 more parts within regards to that. Also, we have to point out over here, so that I very much recommend everyone to actually watch over those videos that we recorded in that part series. And we did record a video within regards to Rav Nisim Yarchi at the time of his Hilula, which was, I think, around March time, if I'm not mistaken. So I'd recommend everyone also to watch that very, very informative video at that stage in time. But we were speaking about one of his descendants over here, famous cantor, Chazan David Riahi over here. So I would recommend everyone to look back on that. Now, friends, over here, we're a community. We are trying to explore the life of some of the great rabbis that there were of yesteryear, especially from the Oriental countries. That's something that we're very much working on at the moment, and very much proud of. We're making progress and trying to really learn about in great detail within regards to the great singers and how they shaped our. We're doing also the Chazanim, the famous Chazanim, of various different points in time, and really trying to get a feel for within regards to that. So that's something that we have to point out over here, friends. So now, friends, if you haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe to the channel over here. We're a community. We don't just record videos over here on the history of rabbis. As said before, we're recording a specific halachic and also a historic series within regards to who were the great rabbis of yesteryear, about the different countries across the world, all across the globe. We've already spoken about nearly 40 countries, like we just did for Tunisia today. We also explored various other countries also, which I recommend everyone to watch those videos. And we've got some exciting places that we are going to speak about in due course. That's something that we have to point out also. So yeah, it's always great to speak about Chazan. I think in this series so far, we've spoken about maybe half a dozen Chazan, possibly 12, maybe even a dozen Chazanim already. Most of the great people we are speaking about happen to be rabbis that we've spoken about here inside the series, which is something that we will have to point out. But he was one of the leading Payetans of his time from Tunisia. And as I said before, he passed away on the 9th of March in the year 2013. So we're talking about nearly 13 years ago. He passed away. And you can see the great teachers he had, and was one of the greatest, let's say, Payetan teachers there were, without doubt, across the world, and definitely one of the famous ones over there. So, and close to many of the great Rabbanim. So, friends, everyone, if you haven't done yet, please subscribe to the channel and join our community. And thanks to everyone for staying online. And we just came out of Asara B'Tevet just quite recently. It happened to be the fast of the 10th of Tevet, very solemn day. A specific day in of itself, where a day of reflection it was. And yeah, this week we are coming in actually into Torah portion reading of Parashat Vayechi. We're actually finishing the book of Bereshit this week, where many communities would actually say Chazak, Chazak, Minit Chazek, as we will progress our way into the book of Shmot. And that's something I would very, very much recommend to just state to everyone also over here. So very, very interesting. Please watch over the previous videos. We've already recorded here in the series possibly as many as about 150 rabbis that actually had come from Tunisia. So that's absolutely astounding. And it just testifies to the great communities that Tunisia actually had, the great rabbinic structure there was over there, the great history there was over there, Jewish Torah culture in of itself, and so much can actually be celebrated within regards to that. So yeah, I think on this note, wishing you all well. I'm recording this here. We happen to be on the 1st of January now, year 20. So it's not at the time period of the famous Chazan's Hilula, but at the same time, it is it happens to be a significant time period in of itself. So very, very interesting. So friends, wishing you all well, and watch your space for more fantastic content. Okay, take care, and thanks for watching, and be well, everyone. Thank you.